What is the best soil pH for growing plants?
Nutrients such as phosphorus, calcium, potassium, and magnesium are most available to plants when the soil pH is between 6.0 and 7.5. Under highly acidic, low pH conditions, these nutrients become insoluble and relatively unavailable for uptake by plants. However, some plants, such as rhododendrons, grow better in acidic soils. High soil pH can also decrease the availability of nutrients. If the soil is more alkaline than pH 8, phosphorus, iron, and many trace elements become insoluble and unavailable for plant uptake.
What is Global Positioning System, GPS, and how does it work?
The Global Positioning System, GPS, has three parts: the space part, the user part, and the control part. The space part consists of 24 satellites in orbit 11,000 nautical miles, 20,300 kilometers, above Earth. The user part consists of a GPS receiver, which may be handheld or mounted in a vehicle. The control part consists of 5 ground stations worldwide to assure the satellites are working properly. Using a GPS receiver, an individual can determine his or her location on or above Earth to within about 300 feet, 90 meters.
Who was the first woman in space?
Valentina V. Tereshkova Nikolava, 1937, a Soviet cosmonaut, was the first woman in space. She was aboard the Vostok 6, launched June 16, 1963. She spent 3 days circling Earth, completing 48 orbits. Although she had little cosmonaut training, she was an accomplished parachutist and was especially fit for the rigors of space travel. The U.S. space program did not put a woman in space until 20 years later when, on June 18, 1983, Sally K. Ride, 1951, flew aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger mission STS-7. In 1987, she moved to the administrative side of NASA and was instrumental in issuing the Ride Report, which recommended future missions and direction for NASA. She retired from NASA in August 1987 to become a research fellow at Stanford University after serving on the Presidential Commission that investigated the Challenger disaster in 1986. She was a physics professor at the University of California, San Diego until 2001 when she founded Sally Ride Science. The company is dedicated to supporting girls' and boys' interests in science, math, and technology by showing science is fun with a variety of programs.
What are subatomic particles?
Subatomic particles are particles that are smaller than atoms. Historically, subatomic particles were considered to be electrons, protons, and neutrons. However, the definition of subatomic particles has now been expanded to include elementary particles, which are so small that they do not appear to be made of anything more minute. The physical study of such particles became possible only during the 20th century with the development of increasingly sophisticated apparatus. Many new particles have been discovered in the last half of the 20th century. A number of proposals have been made to organize the particles by their spin, their mass, or their common properties. One system is now commonly known as the Standard Model. This system recognizes two basic types of fundamental particles, quarks and leptons. Other force-carrying particles are called bosons. Photons, gluons, and weakons are bosons. Leptons include electrons, muons, tau, and three kinds of neutrinos. Quarks never occur alone in nature. They always combine to form particles called hadrons. According to the Standard Model, all other subatomic particles consist of some combination of quarks and their antiparticles. A proton consists of three quarks.
Who developed plant breeding into a modern science?
Luther Burbank, 1849 to 1926, developed plant breeding as a modern science. His breeding techniques included crosses of plant strains native to North America and foreign strains. He obtained seedlings that were then grafted onto fully developed plants for an appraisal of hybrid characteristics. His keen sense of observation allowed him to recognize desirable characteristics, enabling him to select only varieties that would be useful. One of his earliest hybridization successes was the Burbank potato, from which more than 800 new strains and varieties of plants including 113 varieties of plums and prunes were developed. More than 20 of these plums and prunes are still commercially important today.
How fast does rain fall?
The speed of rainfall varies with drop size and wind speed. A typical raindrop in still air falls about 600 feet. 182 meters per minute or about 7 miles, 11 kilometers per hour. Large raindrops can reach speeds of 16 to 20 miles, 26 to 32 kilometers per hour. Very small raindrops may fall slowly at no more than 1 mile, 1.6 kilometer per hour.
Who was the first physician to use chemotherapy as a medical treatment?
Chemotherapy is the use of chemical substances to treat diseases, specifically malignant diseases. The drug must interfere with the growth of bacterial, parasitic, or tumor cells, without significantly affecting host cells. Especially effective in types of cancers such as leukemia and lymphoma. Chemotherapy was introduced in medicine by the German physician Paul Ehrlich, 1854 to 1915.
How did the electrical term ampere originate?
It was named for André Marie Ampere, 1775 to 1836. The physicist who formulated the basic laws of the science of electrodynamics. The ampere, A, often abbreviated as amp, is the unit of electric current. Defined at the constant current, that, maintained in two straight parallel infinite conductors placed 1 meter apart in a vacuum, would produce a force between the conductors of 2x10 to 7 Newton per meter. For example, the amount of current flowing through a 100 watt light bulb is 1 amp. Through a toaster, 10 amps, a TV set, 3 amps, a car battery, 50 amps, while cranking. A Newton, N, is defined as a unit of force needed to accelerate 1 kilogram by 1 meter second 2, or 1 N equals 1, kg/m/s2.
What is the difference between science and technology?
Science and technology are related disciplines, but have different goals. The basic goal of science is to acquire a fundamental knowledge of the natural world. Outcomes of scientific research are the theorems, laws, and equations that explain the natural world. It is often described as a pure science. Technology is the quest to solve problems in the natural world with the ultimate goal of improving humankind's control of their environment. Technology is, therefore, often described as applied science, applying the laws of science to specific problems. The distinction between science and technology blurs since many times researchers investigating a scientific problem will discover a practical application for the knowledge they acquire.
What are the similarities and differences between the nervous system and the endocrine system?
The endocrine and nervous are both regulatory systems that permit communication between cells, tissues, and organs. Both systems are devoted to maintaining homeostasis by coordinating and regulating the activities of other cells, tissues, organs, and systems. Both systems are regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. Chemical messengers are important in both systems. Although their method of transmission and release differs in the two systems, a major difference between the endocrine system and nervous system is the rate of response to a stimulus. In general, the nervous system responds to a stimulus very rapidly, often within a few milliseconds, while it may take the endocrine system seconds and sometimes hours or even days to offer a response. Furthermore, the chemical signals released by the nervous system typically act over very short distances. A synapse, while hormones in the endocrine system are generally carried by the blood to target organs. Finally, the effects of the nervous system generally last only a brief amount of time, while those of the endocrine system are longer lasting.
Why are the crystals in the cave of crystals so large?
The Cave of Crystals, Cavo de los Cristales, was discovered in the Nayaka mine in Chihuahua, Mexico in 2000. Crystals in the cave are made of gypsum and measure 36 feet, 11 meters long and can weigh up to 55 tons, as long as school buses and as heavy as a small herd of elephants. The cave is located nearly 1,000 feet, 300 meters, below the surface. The air temperature in the cave is 112 degrees Fahrenheit 50 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is 90 to 100%. The crystals grew because the water temperature was 136 degrees Fahrenheit 58 degrees Celsius. The temperature at which the mineral anhydrite dissolves into gypsum. The crystallized form of gypsum is selenite. Conditions in the cave were constant, allowing the crystals to continue to form and grow to their large size until 1985, when miners used pumps to lower the water table. Draining the cave. If the cave is allowed to fill with water again, the crystals will resume growing.
What types of coal are there?
The first stage in the formation of coal converts peat into lignite, a dark brown type of coal. Lignite is then converted into subbituminous coal as pressure from overlying materials increases. Under still greater pressure, a harder coal called bituminous, or soft, coal is produced. Intense pressure changes bituminous coal into anthracite, the hardest of all coals.
How much force does a human bite generate?
All the jaw muscles working together can close the teeth with a force as great as 55 pounds. 25 kilograms, on the incisors, or 200 pounds, 90.7 kilograms, on the molars. A force as great as 268 pounds, 122 kilograms, for molars has been reported.
What is a trademark?
A trademark protects a word, phrase, name, symbol, sound, or color that identifies and distinguishes the source of the goods or services of one party, individual or company, from those of another party.
What was the first computer game?
Despite the fact that computers were not invented for playing games, the idea that they could be used for games did not take long to emerge. Alan Turing proposed a famous game called Imitation Game in 1950. In 1952, Rand Air Defense Lab in Santa Monica created the first military simulation games. In 1953, Arthur Samuel, 1901 to 1990, created a checkers program on the new IBM 701. From these beginnings, computer games have today become a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Which disease is the deadliest?
The most deadly infectious disease was the pneumonic form of the plague. The so-called Black Death of 1347 to 1351, with a mortality rate of 100%. Today, the disease with the highest mortality, almost 100%, is rabies in humans when it prevents the victim from swallowing water. This disease is not to be confused with being bitten by a rabid animal. With immediate attention, the rabies virus can be prevented from invading the nervous system, and the survival rate in this circumstance is 95%. AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. First reported in 1981, is caused by HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus. In 1993, HIV infection was the most common cause of death among persons aged 25 to 44 years. In 1999 alone, 14,802 U.S. residents died from the AIDS/HIV infection. According to the National Center for Health Statistics, although still a significant cause of death among persons aged 25 to 44, it is no longer the most common cause of death.
Prior to the condom, what was the main contraceptive practice?
Contraceptive devices have been used throughout recorded history. The most traditional of such devices was a sponge soaked in vinegar. The condom was named for its English inventor, the personal physician to Charles II, 1630 to 1685, who used a sheath of stretched, oiled sheep intestine to protect the king from syphilis. Previously penile sheaths were used, such as the linen one made by Italian anatomist Gabriel Fio Pius. 1523 to 1562, but they were too heavy to be successful.
What are the common mathematical formulas for area?
Area of a rectangle, area equals length times width A equals LW, area equals altitude times base A equals of area of a circle. Area equals pi times the radius squared. A equals tier 2 or A equals 1/4 TID2, area of a triangle. Area equals 1/2 the altitude times the base. A equals 1/2 of area of the surface of a sphere. Area equals 4 times pi times the radius squared. A equals 4 tier 2 or A equals TID2 area of a square. Area equals length times width, or length of one side squared. A equals S23 area of a cube. Area equals square of the length of one side times 6. A equals 6S2 area of an ellipse. Area equals long diameter times short diameter times 0.7854. Volume of a cylinder. Volume equals area of the base times the height. V equals BH. Volume of a circular cylinder with circular base. Volume equals pi times the square of the radius of the base times the height. V equals tier 2h. Volume of a cube. Volume equals the length of one side cube. V equals S3. Volume of a cone. Volume equals 1/3 times pi times the square of the radius of the base times the height. V equals 1/3 tier 2h. Volume of a rectangular solid. Volume equals length times width times height. V equals LWH.
What was the Big Bang?
The Big Bang theory is the explanation most commonly accepted by astronomers for the origin of the universe. It proposes that the universe began as the result of an explosion, the Big Bang, 15 to 20 billion years ago. Two observations form the basis of this cosmology. First, as Edwin Hubble, 1889 to 1953, demonstrated, the universe is expanding uniformly, with objects at greater distances receding at greater velocities. Secondly, Earth is bathed in a glow of radiation that has the characteristics expected from a remnant of a hot primeval fireball. This radiation was discovered by Arno A. Penzias, 1933, and Robert W. Wilson, 1936, of Bell Telephone Laboratories. In time, the matter created by the Big Bang came together in huge clumps to form the galaxies. Smaller clumps within the galaxies formed stars. Parts of at least one clump became a group of planets, our solar system.
From where do comets originate?
According to a theory developed by Dutch astronomer Jan Oort, 1900 to 1992. There is a large cloud, now called the Oort cloud, of gas, dust, and comets orbiting beyond Pluto out to perhaps 100,000 astronomical units, O. Occasional stars passing close to this cloud disturb some of the comets from their orbits. Some fall inwards toward the sun. Comets, sometimes called dirty snowballs, are made up mostly of ice, with some dust mixed in. When a comet moves closer to the sun, the dust and ice of the core, or nucleus, heats up, producing a tail of material that trails along behind it. The tail is pushed out by the solar wind and almost always points away from the sun. Most comets have highly elliptical orbits that carry them around the sun and then fling them back out to the outer reaches of the solar system, never to return. Occasionally, however, a close passage by a comet near one of the planets can alter a comet's orbit, making it stay in the middle or inner solar system. Such a comet is called a short-period comet because it passes close to the Sun at regular intervals. The most famous short-period comet is Comet Halley, which reaches perihelion, the point in its orbit that is closest to the Sun, about every 76 years. Comet Inc., with an orbital period of 3.3 years, is another short-period comet.
What was the likely purpose of the human appendix?
Experts can only theorize on its use. It may have had the same purpose it does in present-day herbivores, where it harbors colonies of bacteria that help in the digestion of cellulose in plant material. Another theory suggests that tonsils and the appendix might manufacture the antibody-producing white blood cells called B lymphocytes. However, B lymphocytes could also be produced by the bone marrow. The third theory is that the appendix may attract body infections to localize the infection in one spot that is not critical to body functioning. The earliest surgical removal of the appendix was by Claude Ries Amyand, 1680 to 1740, in England in 1736.
Who was the founder of the Soviet space program?
Sergei P. Korolev, 1907 to 1966, made enormous contributions to the development of Soviet manned spaceflight, and his name is linked with their most significant space achievements. Trained as an aeronautical engineer, he directed the Moscow group studying the principles of rocket propulsion, and in 1946 took over the Soviet program to develop long-range ballistic rockets. Under Korolev, the Soviets used these rockets for space projects and launched the world's first satellite on October 4, 1957. Besides a vigorous, unmanned, interplanetary research program, Korolev's goal was to place men in space, and following tests with animals his manned space flight program was initiated when Yuri Gagarin was successfully launched into Earth's orbit. Chaffee, Grissom, and White died in a cabin fire during a test firing of the Apollo 1 rocket. Komarov was killed in Soyuz 1 when the capsule's parachute failed. Dobrovolsky, Patsayev, and Volkov were killed during the Soyuz II's re-entry, when a valve accidentally opened and released their capsule's atmosphere. Jarvis, McAuliffe, McNair, Onizuka, Resnick, Scobie, and Smith died when the Space Shuttle Challenger STS-51L exploded 73 seconds after liftoff. Husband, McCool, Anderson, Jabla, Brown, Clark, and Ramon died when the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated over Texas upon re-entry. In addition, 19 other astronauts and cosmonauts have died of non-space related causes. 14 of these died in air crashes, 4 died of natural causes, and 1 died in an auto crash. What was one of the worst disasters in the U.S.?
What was the historical significance of hemp?
During the early years of colonial America, hemp, Agave cisalina, was as common as cotton is now. It was an easy crop to grow, requiring little water, no fertilizers, and no pesticides. The fabric looks and feels like linen. It was used for uniforms of soldiers, paper. The first 2 drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on hemp paper, and an all-purpose fabric. Betsy Ross's flag was made of red, white, and blue hemp.
What is the chemical formula for TNT?
TNT is the abbreviation for 2,4,6-trinitrotoluene C7H5N3O6 or C6H2, CH3, NO2, 3. TNT is a powerful, highly explosive compound widely used in conventional bombs. Discovered by Joseph Wilbrand, 1811–1894, in 1863. It is made by treating toluene with nitric acid and sulfuric acid. This yellow crystalline solid with a low melting point has low shock sensitivity and even burns without exploding. This makes it safe to handle and cast, but once detonated, it explodes violently.
What do truffles look like?
A truffle has a rather unappealing appearance, round and irregularly shaped with a thick, rough, wrinkled skin that varies in color from almost black to off-white. The fruiting bodies present on truffles are fragrant, fleshy structures that usually grow to about the size of a golf ball. They range from white to gray or brown to nearly black in color. There are nearly 70 known varieties of truffles, but the most desirable is the black truffle known as black diamond that grows in France's Périgord and Corsi regions as well as Italy's Umbria region. The flesh of the black diamond appears to be black, but it is actually dark brown, and contains white striations. The flesh has an aroma that is extremely pungent. The next most popular is the white truffle, actually off-white or beige, of Italy's Piedmont region. Both the aroma and flavor of this truffle are earthy and garlicky. Fresh truffles are available from late fall to midwinter, and can be stored in the refrigerator for up to 3 days. Dark truffles are generally used to flavor foods such as omelets, polentas, risottos, and sauces. White truffles are usually served raw. They are often grated over foods such as pasta or dishes containing cheese, as their flavors are complementary. They are also added at the last minute to cook dishes.
What is the law of very large numbers?
Formulated by Percy Diaconis, 1945, and Frederick Mosteller, 1916–2006, of Harvard University. This long understood law of statistics states that with a large enough sample, any outrageous thing is apt to happen. Therefore, seemingly amazing coincidences can actually be expected. If given sufficient time or a large enough pool of subjects. For example, when a New Jersey woman won the lottery twice in 4 months. The media publicized it as an incredible long shot of 1 in 17 trillion. However, when statisticians looked beyond this individual's chances and asked what were the odds of the same happening to any person buying a lottery ticket in the United States over a 6-month period, the number dropped dramatically to 1 in 30. According to researchers, coincidences arise often in statistical work, but some have hidden causes and therefore are not coincidences at all. Many are simply chance events reflecting the luck of the draw.
What is unusual about the way the emperor penguin's eggs are incubated?
Each female emperor penguin, Aptenidites fursteri, lays one large egg. Initially, both sexes share in incubating the egg by carrying it on his or her feet and covering it with a fold of skin. After a few days of passing the egg back and forth, the female leaves to feed in the open water of the Arctic Ocean. Balancing their eggs on their feet, the male penguins shuffle about the rookery, periodically huddling together for warmth during blizzards and frigid weather. If an egg is inadvertently orphaned, a male with no egg will quickly adopt it. 2 months after the female's departure, the chick hatches. The male feeds it with a milky substance he regurgitates until the female returns, now padded with blubber. The females take over feeding the chicks with fish they have stored in their crops. The females do not return to their mate, however, but wander from male to male until one allows her to take his chick. It is then the male's turn to feed in open water and restore the fat layer they lost while incubating.
What are the main characteristics of animals?
Animals are a very diverse group of organisms, but all of them share a number of characteristics. Animals are multicellular eukaryotes that are heterotrophic, ingesting and digesting food inside the body. Animal cells lack the cell walls that provide support in the bodies of plants and fungi. Most animals have muscle systems and nervous systems responsible for movement and rapid response to stimuli in their environment. In addition, most animals reproduce sexually with the diploid stage dominating the life cycle. In most species a large, non-motile egg is fertilized by a small, flagellated sperm, thus forming a diploid zygote. The transformation of a zygote to an animal of a specific form depends on the controlled expression in the developing embryo of special regulatory genes.
What are the component molecules of DNA?
The full name of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, with the nucleic part coming from the location of DNA in the nuclei of eukaryotic cells. DNA is actually a polymer, long strand, of nucleotides. A nucleotide has three component parts: a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, deoxyribose, and a nitrogen base. If you visualize DNA as a ladder, the sides of the ladder are made of the phosphate and deoxyribose molecules, and the rungs are made of two different nitrogen bases. The nitrogen bases are the crucial part of the molecule with regard to genes. Specific sequences of nitrogen bases make up a gene.
What is nuclear magnetic resonance imaging?
Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, sometimes called nuclear magnetic resonance imaging. NMR, is a non-invasive, non-ionizing diagnostic technique. It is useful in detecting small tumors, blocked blood vessels, or damaged vertebral discs. Because it does not involve the use of radiation, it can often be used where X-rays are dangerous. Large magnets beam energy through the body, causing hydrogen atoms in the body to resonate. This produces energy in the form of tiny electrical signals. A computer detects these signals, which vary in different parts of the body and according to whether an organ is healthy or not. The variation enables a picture to be produced on a screen and interpreted by a medical specialist. What distinguishes MRI from computerized X-ray scanners is that most X-ray studies cannot distinguish between a living body and a cadaver, while MRI sees the difference between life and death in great detail. More specifically, it can discriminate between healthy and diseased tissues with more sensitivity than conventional radiographic instruments like X-rays or CAT scans. CAT, computerized axial tomography. Scanners have been around since 1973 and are actually glorified X-ray machines. They offer three-dimensional viewing but are limited because the object imaged must remain still. The concept of using MRI to detect tumors in patients was proposed by Raymond Domedian, 1936, in a 1972 patent application. The fundamental MRI imaging concept used in all present-day MRI instruments was proposed by Paul Lauterbach, 1929 to 2007, in an article published in Nature in 1973. Lauterbach and Peter Mansfield, 1933. Were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2003 for their discoveries concerning magnetic resonance imaging. The main advantages of MRI are that it not only gives superior images of soft tissues, like organs, but can also measure dynamic physiological changes in a non-invasive manner, without penetrating the body in any way. A disadvantage of MRI is that it cannot be used for every patient. For example, patients with implants, pacemakers, or cerebral aneurysm clips made of metal cannot be examined using MRI because the machine's magnet could potentially move these objects within the body, causing damage.
Which government agencies regulate the storage of nuclear waste?
The Department of Energy, DOE, Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, are responsible for the disposal of spent nuclear fuel and other radioactive waste. The DOE has the responsibility for developing permanent disposal capacity for spent fuel and other high-level radioactive waste. The EPA has responsibility for developing environmental standards to evaluate the safety of a geologic repository. The NRC has responsibility for developing regulations to implement the EPA safety standards and for licensing the repository.
What does the symbol H2O2 stand for?
It is hydrogen peroxide, a syrupy liquid compound used as a strong bleaching, oxidizing, and disinfecting agent. It is usually made either in anthrohydroquinone autoxidation processes or electrolytically. The primary use of hydrogen peroxide is in bleaching wood pulp. A more familiar use is as a 3% solution as an antiseptic and germicide. Undiluted, it can cause burns to human skin and mucous membranes. Is a fire and explosion risk, and can be highly toxic.
What is the difference between DNA and RNA?
DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is a nucleic acid formed from a repetition of simple building blocks called nucleotides. The nucleotides consist of phosphate, PO4, sugar, deoxyribose, and a base that is either adenine, A, thymine, T, guanine, G, or cytosine, C. In a DNA molecule, this basic unit is repeated in a double helix structure made from two chains of nucleotides linked between the bases. The links are either between A and T or between G and C. The structure of the bases does not allow other kinds of links. The famous double helix structure resembles a twisted ladder. The 1962 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins, 1916 to 2004, for determining the molecular structure of DNA. RNA, ribonucleic acid, is also a nucleic acid. but it consists of a single chain and the sugar is ribose rather than deoxyribose. The bases are the same except that the thymine, T, which appears in DNA, is replaced by another base called uracil, U, which links only to adenine, A.
What is the sun made of?
The sun is an incandescent ball of gases. Its mass is 1.8 x 1027 tons or 1.8 octillion tons, a mass 330,000 times as great as Earth.
Does sound travel faster in air or water?
The speed of sound is not a constant, it varies depending on the medium in which it travels. The measurement of sound velocity in the medium of air must take into account many factors, including air temperature, pressure, and purity. At sea level and 32 degrees Fahrenheit 0 degrees Celsius, scientists do not agree on a standard figure. Estimates range from 740 to 741.5 miles, 1191.6 to 1193.2 kilometers per hour. As air temperature rises, sound velocity increases. Sound travels faster in water than in air and even faster in iron and steel. Sounds traveling a mile in air for 5 seconds will travel the same distance in 1 second underwater and 1/3 of a second in steel.
Which stars are the brightest?
The brightness of a star is called its magnitude. Apparent magnitude is how bright a star appears to the naked eye. The lower the magnitude, the brighter the star. On a clear night, stars of about magnitude 16 can be seen with the naked eye. Large telescopes can detect objects as faint as 127. Very bright objects have negative magnitudes, the sun is -26.8.
What was a victory garden?
During World War II, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Claude R. Wickard, 1893 to 1967, encouraged homeowners to plant vegetable gardens wherever they could find space. Everyone believed that the produce from such gardens would help lower the price of vegetables needed by the U.S. War Department to feed the troops, thus saving money that could be spent elsewhere on the military. In addition to indirectly aiding the war effort, these gardens were also considered a civil morale booster. Individual gardeners could feel empowered by their contribution of labor and rewarded by the produce that was grown. This made victory gardens a part of the daily life on the home front. By 1945 there were said to be 20 million victory gardens producing about 40% of all American vegetables in many unused scraps of land. Such sites as the strip between a sidewalk and the street, town squares, and the land around Chicago's Cook County Jail were used. The term Victory Garden derives from an English book by that title written by Richard Gardner in 1603.
How large is the International Space Station?
When the ISS is completed, it will weigh 925,000 pounds, 419,600 kilograms. It will measure 361 feet, 110.03 meters. From end to end, or the equivalent of a football field, including the end zones. There will be more than 33,000 cubic feet, 935 cubic meters, of habitable space. The amount of habitable space will be almost equal to the room inside 1.5 Boeing 747 jetliners.
When was the bald eagle adopted as the national bird of the United States?
On June 20, 1782, the citizens of the newly independent United States of America adopted the bald or American eagle as their national emblem. At first, the heraldic artists depicted a bird that could have been a member of any of the larger species. But by 1902, the bird portrayed on the seal of the United States of America had assumed its proper white plumage on the head and tail. The choice of the bald eagle was not unanimous. Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790, preferred the wild turkey. Oftentimes a tongue-in-cheek humorist, Franklin thought the turkey a wily but brave, intelligent, and prudent bird. He viewed the eagle, on the other hand, as having a bad moral character and not getting his living honestly, preferring instead to steal fish from hard-working fishhawks. He also found the eagle a coward that readily flees from the irritating attacks of the much smaller kingbird.
Are any bacteria visible to the naked eye?
Apulopiscium fischelsoni, which lives in the gut of the brown surgeonfish. Acanthurus nigrofuscus, is visible to naked eye. It was first identified in 1985 and mistakenly classified as a protozoan. Later studies analyzed the organism's genetic material and proved it to be a bacterium of unprecedented size. Inches, 0.38 millimeters, in diameter, or about the size of a period in a small print book.
What are the levels of structural organization in vertebrate animals, including humans?
Every vertebrate animal has 4 major levels of hierarchical organization: cell, tissue, organ, and organ system. Each level in the hierarchy is of increasing complexity. And all organ systems work together to maintain life.
Who sent the first email?
In the early 1970s, computer engineer Ray Tomlinson, 1941, noticed that people working at the same mainframe computer could leave one another messages. He imagined great utility of this communication system if messages could be sent to different mainframes. So he wrote a software program over the period of about a week that used file transfer protocols and send and receive features. It enabled people to send messages from one mainframe to another over the ARPANET, the network that became the Internet. To make sure the messages went to the right system, he adopted the @ symbol, because it was the least ambiguous keyboard symbol and because it was brief.
Which U.S. hurricanes have caused the most deaths?
The 10 deadliest United States hurricanes are listed below.
How do cells communicate with each other?
Cells communicate with each other via small signaling molecules that are produced by specific cells and received by target cells. This communication system operates on both a local and long-distance level. The signaling molecules can be proteins, fatty acid derivatives, or gases. Nitric oxide is an example of a gas that is part of a locally based signaling system and is able to signal for a human being's blood pressure to be lowered. Hormones are long-distance signaling molecules that must be transported via the circulatory system from their production site to their target cells. Plant cells, because of their rigid cell walls, have cytoplasmic bridges called plasmidesmata that allow cell-to-cell communication. Animals use gap junctions to transfer material between adjacent cells.
How is Pascal's triangle used?
Pascal's triangle is an array of numbers arranged so that every number is equal to the sum of the two numbers above it on either side. It can be represented in several slightly different triangles, but this is the most common form. 1 1 2 3 6 515. The triangle is used to determine the numerical coefficients resulting from the computation of higher powers of a binomial, two numbers added together. When a 2 binomial is raised to a higher power, the result is expanded, using the numbers in that row of the triangle. For example, a plus b, 1 equals a 1 plus b1, using the coefficients in the second line of the triangle. A plus b, 2 equals a 2 plus 2 ab plus b2, using the coefficients in the next line of the triangle. The first line of the triangle correlates to a and b0. While the calculation of coefficients is fairly straightforward. The triangle is useful in calculating them for the higher powers without needing to multiply them out. Binomial coefficients are useful in calculating probabilities. Blaise Pascal was one of the pioneers in developing laws of probability. As with many other mathematical developments, there is some evidence of a previous appearance of the triangle in China. Around 1100 CE, the Chinese mathematician Xie Xian wrote about the tabulation system for unlocking binomial coefficients, the first publication of the triangle was probably in a book called Piling Up Powers and Unlocking Coefficients by Lu Juxi.
Is there a Nobel Prize in mathematics?
We do not know for certain why Alfred Nobel did not establish a prize in mathematics. There are several theories revolving around his relationship and dislike for Gösta Mittag-Leffler. 1846 to 1927, the leading Swedish mathematician in Nobel's time. Most likely it never occurred to Nobel, or he decided against another prize. The Fields Medal in mathematics is generally considered as prestigious as the Nobel Prize. The Fields Medal was first awarded in 1936. Its full name is now the C.R.M. Fields PIMS Prize. The 2009 winner was Martin Barlow, 1953. For his work in probability and in the behavior of diffusions on fractals and other disordered media.
What is the difference between simple interest and compound interest?
Simple interest is calculated on the amount of principal only. Compound interest is calculated on the amount of principal plus any previous interest already earned. For example, $100 invested at a rate of 5% for 1 year will earn $5 after 1 year earning simple interest. The same $100 will earn $5.12 if compounded monthly.
What is a controlled substance?
The Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1971 was designed to control the distribution and use of all depressant and stimulant drugs and other drugs of abuse or potential abuse. Centrally acting drugs are divided into 5 classes called Schedule I through V.
Are all craters part of a volcano?
No, not all craters are of volcanic origin. A crater is a nearly circular area of deformed sedimentary rocks, with a central, vent-like depression. Some craters are caused by the collapse of the surface when underground salt or limestone dissolves. the withdrawal of groundwater and the melting of glacial ice can also cause the surface to collapse, forming a crater. Craters are also caused by large meteorites, comets, and asteroids that hit Earth. These are called impact craters. A notable impact crater is Meteor Crater near Winslow, Arizona. It is 4,000 feet, 1,219 meters, in diameter, 600 feet, 183 meters deep, and is estimated to have been formed 30,000 to 50,000 years ago.
What is the Rasmussen report?
Dr. Norman Rasmussen, 1927 to 2003, of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, conducted a study of nuclear reactor safety for the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. The 1975 study cost $4 million and took 3 years to complete. It concluded that the odds against a worst-case accident occurring were astronomically large, 10 million to 1. The worst-case accident projected about 3,000 early deaths and $14 billion in property damage due to contamination. Cancers occurring later due to the event might number 1,500 per year. The study concluded that the safety features engineered into a plant are very likely to prevent serious consequences from a meltdown. Other groups criticized the Rasmussen report and declared that the estimates of risk were too low. After the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, some scientists estimated that a major nuclear accident might in fact happen every decade.
What are the 7 endocrine glands?
The major endocrine glands include the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroids, adrenals, pancreas, testes, and ovaries. These glands secrete hormones into the blood system, which generally stimulate some change in metabolic activity. Pituitary secretes ACTH to stimulate the adrenal cortex, which produces aldosterone to control sodium and potassium reabsorption by the kidneys, FSH to stimulate gonad function, and prolactin to stimulate milk secretion of breasts, TSH to stimulate thyroid gland to produce thyroxine, LH to stimulate ovulation in females and testosterone production in males, GH to stimulate general growth. Stores oxytocin for uterine contraction. Thyroid secretes triiodothyronine, T3, and thyroxine, T4, to stimulate metabolic rate, especially in growth and development, and secretes calcitonin to lower blood calcium levels. Parathyroids secrete hormone PTH to increase blood calcium levels and stimulates calcium reabsorption in kidneys. Adrenals secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine to help the body cope with stress and raise blood pressure, heart rate, metabolic rate, blood sugar levels, etc. Aldosterone secreted by the adrenal cortex maintains sodium-potassium balance in kidneys, and cortisol helps the body adapt to stress, mobilizes fat, and raises blood sugar level. Pancreas secretes insulin to control blood sugar levels. Stimulates glycogen production, fat storage, and protein synthesis. Glucagon secretion raises blood sugar level and mobilizes fat. Ovaries and testes secrete estrogens, progesterone, or testosterone to stimulate growth and reproductive processes.
Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, classify carcinogens?
A carcinogen is an agent that can produce cancer. A malignant growth or tumor that spreads throughout the body, destroying tissue. The EPA classifies chemical and physical substances according to their toxicity to humans. Group A human carcinogen. This classification indicates that there is sufficient evidence from epidemiological studies to support a cause-effect relationship between the substance and cancer. Group B probable human carcinogen. B1 substances are classified as B1 carcinogens on the basis of sufficient evidence from animal studies, and limited evidence from epidemiological studies. B2 substances are classified as B2 carcinogens on the basis of sufficient evidence from animal studies. With inadequate or non-existent epidemiological data. Group C possible human carcinogen. For this classification, there is limited evidence of carcinogenicity from animal studies and no epidemiological data. Group D not classifiable as to human carcinogenicity. The data from human epidemiological and animal studies are inadequate or completely lacking. So no assessment as to the substance's cancer-causing hazard is possible. Group E evidence of non-carcinogenicity for humans. Substances in this category have tested negative in at least 2 adequate, as defined by the EPA. Animal cancer tests in different species and inadequate 85 epidemiological and animal studies. Classification in Group E is based on available evidence. Substances may prove to be carcinogenic under certain conditions. The National Toxicology Program also has published a report on carcinogens, ROC. It identifies substances that are either known to be human carcinogen or reasonably anticipated to be human carcinogen. The most recent ROC, the 11th, released in 2005, includes 246 entries. 58 of which are known to be human carcinogen and 188 which are reasonably anticipated to be human carcinogen.
How is the star in star sapphires produced?
Sapphires are composed of gem-quality corundum, Al2O3. Color appears in sapphires when small amounts of iron and titanium are present. Star sapphires contain needles of the mineral rutile that will display as a 6-ray star figure when cut in the unfaceted cabochon, dome or convex, form. The most highly prized star sapphires are blue. Black or white star sapphires are less valuable. Since a ruby is simply the red variety of corundum, star rubies also exist.
How does the temperature of the Earth change as one goes deeper underground?
The Earth's temperature increases with depth. Measurements made in deep mines and drill holes indicate that the rate of temperature increase varies from place to place in the world, ranging from 59 degrees to 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 to 75 degrees Celsius, per kilometer in depth. Actual temperature measurements cannot be made beyond the deepest drill holes, which are a little more than 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers, deep. Estimates suggest that the temperatures at Earth's center can reach values of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit 2,760 degrees Celsius or higher.
What is the scientific name for ringing in the ears?
Tinnitus is the perception of sound in the ears or head where no external source is present. It is often referred to as ringing in the ears. In almost all cases, tinnitus is a subjective noise, meaning that only the person who has tinnitus can hear it. Persistent tinnitus usually indicates the presence of hearing loss. The exact cause of tinnitus is not known, but there are several likely sources, all of which are known to trigger or worsen the condition. They include noise-induced hearing loss, wax buildup in the ear canal, medicines that are toxic to the ear or sinus infections, jaw misalignment, and head and neck trauma.
What is an organ?
An organ is a group of several different tissues working together as a unit to perform a specific function or functions. Each organ performs functions that none of the component tissues can perform alone. This cooperative interaction of different tissues is a basic feature of animals, including humans. The heart is an example of an organ. It consists of cardiac muscle wrapped in connective tissue. The heart chambers are lined with epithelium. Nerve tissue controls the rhythmic contractions of the cardiac muscles.
What is the difference between osteopathic medicine, homeopathy, naturopathy, and chiropractic medicine?
Osteopathic medicine was developed in the United States by Dr. Andrew Taylor Still, 1828 to 1917. It recognizes the role of the musculoskeletal system in healthy function of the human body. The physician is fully licensed and uses manipulation techniques. as well as traditional diagnostic and therapeutic procedures. Osteopathy is practiced as part of conventional Western medicine. Developed by a German physician, Christian F. S. Hahnemann, 1755–1843. The therapy of homeopathy treats patients with small doses of 2,000 substances. Based on the principle that like cures like, the medicine used is one that produces the same symptoms in a healthy person that the disease is producing in the sick person. Chiropractic medicine is based on the belief that disease results from the lack of normal nerve function. Relying on physical manipulation and adjustment of the spine for therapy, rather than on drugs or surgery, this therapy, used by the ancient Egyptians, Chinese, and Hindus, was rediscovered in 1895 by American osteopath Daniel David Palmer, 1845–1913. Naturopathy is based on the principle that disease is due to the accumulation of waste products and toxins in the body. Practitioners believe that health is maintained by avoiding anything artificial or unnatural in the diet or in the environment.